The transition between generations of My Little Pony was always a big event, but what happened to G5 to not have a proper ending? Hey beautiful people, I'm Julie, and let's understand what went wrong and why this generation was marked by so many doubts and controversy. First of all, we had an almost impossible task: to succeed G4 that was a cultural phenomenon. G4 built a huge fandom, brought some amazing characters like Twilight Sparkle and Rainbow Dash, and delivered amazing stories for almost a decade. Yes, a decade! Time flies. When G5 was announced, many fans expected a worthy sequel, but what they got was something that seemed disconnected and rushed. The absence of a strong link between both generations left many fans frustrated right away. And I get it, My Little Pony wasn't created for the audience that it reached with G4. So it's logical that when they started to develop this new gen, they would keep the show as a kids one. But the way they did it wasn't the best. G5 premiered as a Netflix movie, what seemed promising. The problem? It introduced new characters and a totally different scenario, but gave no explanations why the world was at that point. Why did magic vanish? What happened to the main six? There were too many questions, and the movie left us wondering about the answers that never came to be in the next series. If G4 was known for building a solid narrative, G5 seemed to lost their own story. The series derived from G5, Leave Your Mark, consisted in episodes that for many times took nowhere. It lacks a strong plot hole that links characters and a solid world building. This lack of direction made many fans lose interest quickly. Although Sunny, Izzy, and Hitch had potential, they never met the level of emotional depth that the main six had. Sunny, for example, seemed to be the new Twilight, but without the development that Twilight had that won over the fans. To make things worse, the group's dynamic for many times feels shallow without the strong bonds that the G4 made. Am I being mean? These characters look like a cheap copy of G4 ones. G4 managed to please both kids and adults, but G5 seems lost. While the movie directs to an old audience, the series adopted a more kid-friendly approach, ignoring the audience that grew up with G4. This is one of the biggest reasons why many fans abandoned G5 right away. G5's designs also caused some controversy. Although a 3D animation was an improvement, many fans think that they lost something. They lost the charm of G4's 2D animation that affected the emotional connection with the characters and the world, making it harder to fall in love with this new gen. G5 started with a promise to explore the main six legacy, but delivered so little of that. While the movie suggests that the old heroes were still relevant, the series left that aside. For some fans that expected a clear sequel, that was a huge disappointment. Another thing that wasn't talked much but contributed for the lack of impact of G5 was the way it treated Equestria. Unlike its previous generations, that made sure to build a strong universe filled with details, with memorable places, and a well-established mythology, G5 presents generic scenarios with the same feeling of G4. The lack of depth in the world revolving the characters made the series lose the biggest strength of the franchise, the feeling of exploring a fresh environment filled with untold stories. Besides that, G5 seemed to try hard to please, but doesn't know whom to please exactly. By trying to grab the attention of a new generation of kids, it also tries to interest older fans, and it ends up failing to please both. That resulted in many episodes that swing between serious moments and silly jokes, without the balance that G4 managed to find. The lack of freedom reinforced the idea that G5 was a product with no identity. With all those issues, it's no surprise that the interest for G5 was rapidly decreased. The lack of engagement reflected in the social media and fans communities, where many were sorry that G5 couldn't live up to the franchise standards. parts. Even the toys didn't sell as the previous generation. And where that leads us? Total failure. There are those who say that G5 was planned to the start to break the main room for G6. If that's true, maybe it explains the lack of investment in some narrative plots and consistent development. And that also reinforces the feeling that G5 was treated as something disposable. What hurts the most is that G5 disappeared without a proper ending. The series ended up abruptly, leaving many unfinished story arcs that were left unanswered. For many fans, it was an anticlimactic farewell that didn't live up to the potential that G5 could have reached. Instead, we had a shallow series with many plot holes, that it didn't explain Equestria and why it was so apocalyptical, and that insinuated that Twilight failed, what drove many fans mad. And that culminated into G5 being one of the most forgettable generations of My Little Pony. I dare to say that it was worse than G2, and that's something for another video. So do you agree with me that G5 needed a better ending? Which was the biggest mistake of this generation? Comment down below. Don't forget to like and share this video so we can keep the talk going. Thank you a lot for watching this video till here, and hasta la vista!